Thank you for joining us. Our sign language interpreter at the bottom end of your screen is William Silla. Now, you'll have to wait for a pay rise. That's President Uhuru Kenyatta's message to teachers. Uhuru has asked teachers to go easy on their demands for a pay hike, saying that the government cannot afford to pay them higher wages at the moment. KTN's Ashamwilu reports on the intrigues at the education conference held earlier today.
If teachers were hopeful that the industrial court would finally sort out their pay dispute with the government, then the president has just burst their bubble.
I call on my friends, and I call them my friends because they are my friends. And they know we have worked together in even much more difficult circumstances. Nipatieni nafasi tupumue. Tutafika.
While officiating the 8th Education International Africa Regional Conference here in Nairobi, President Kenyatta had no good news for teachers, at least not yet.
We have moved to improve the pay of teachers. Yes, SG and Chair and my sister Mudhoni here and others will say we have not yet done enough. But Rome wasn't built in a day, my friends, step by step.
But the teachers' unionists present at the conference would not let the president go without a subtle nudge.
I can convincingly say and tell you that the President of the Republic of Kenya is a great friend of teachers. And he is a great friend of teachers here in Kenya.
Even though the president and the teachers were on different pages over better wages for teachers, they agreed on one thing.
We cannot talk about quality education without enough quality trained teachers. Enough quality trained teachers.
We adopted it as a key agenda of my government's transformative agenda to accelerate and to improve access, quality, and impact of education through sustainable, demonstrable, and impactful measures.
The teachers' unions called off their nationwide strike on the 5th of January when the industrial court took over the dispute between them and the Teachers Service Commission over salaries. Although the government offered to introduce leave allowances for all teachers beginning this June, teachers insist they want their basic pay increased by 150%. Ashamwilu, KTN, Nairobi.
So the president making it very clear there the government cannot afford higher wages. That story by Ashamwilu forms the basis of our big question tonight. We're asking, should teachers heed the president's advice and shelve their demands for a pay hike? Let us know what you think. You can tweet us at KTN Kenya, at Linda Ogutu. I'll sample your views during this bulletin. Still on teachers, students in northern Kenya continue to bear the brunt of the stalemate between the government and teachers. As teachers remain adamant that they will not go back, government has asked teachers to first report to their duty stations and process their requests for transfers from the schools where they have been working. Betty Kialo reports.
Education Cabinet Secretary Jacob Kaimenyi today made it clear that no transfers of teachers from northern Kenya will be approved. Kaimenyi said that transfers will only be granted for medical reasons, therefore asking teachers to go back to work.
We have a 5-year policy, as you've heard. We don't transfer a teacher before 5 years are over in the region, ideally, unless there are medical reasons for it. And in those instances, even where people try and get them transferred unfairly without them asking, in fact, TSC should pay them if they are transferred without any request.
Teachers Service Commission Chair Lydia Nzomo said that reports on the ground indicate that learning in different institutions in Wajir and Mandera was on course, with some teachers deciding to go back.
Teachers actually reporting teachers who had been posted to Wajir and Garissa, most of them have reported. We have a challenge with the ones who have been working in Mandera, and we had given them a chance to say that they report, because we have been assured by the government that the position of security is being handled and that the teachers are going to be safe.
However, on the ground, we find a different picture. This is Wajir Girls High School, the only girls' national school in the area. Learning is ongoing. Everything may look normal, especially with this teacher in class, but the students reveal that everything is but normal. According to the students, the total number of teachers in this school is 27, but only 7 have reported to work.
We want the president and the government at large to give hand in hand so that they can really help us. It is the only national girls' school we are having so far in Wajir, so we need a lot of support. Really, the government, you need to listen our cries. We want your help.
She says with 20 teachers having not reported, there are subjects that are not being taught. The students worry that this will put them at a disadvantage when they sit for the KCSE examinations at the end of the year.
We are just like any other student in this country. They are waiting exams, we are also waiting exams. So I am asking the government if they are not going to postpone the exam dates and we are in this situation. At least we have only covered, let me say, biologists. We have only 7 teachers. 7 teachers for whole school, over 500 students.
With close to 1,000 teachers vowing not to go back to northern Kenya, the Teachers Service Commission has given individual schools a nod to take any punitive actions against teachers who fail to return to work. Betty Kialo, KTN.
From teacher intrigues, let's turn to school fees. The Education Cabinet Secretary Professor Jacob Kaimenyi has said head teachers charging inflated fees are doing so against the ministry's set guidelines. Kaimenyi says the government had increased the capitation grant per student from 10,265 shillings to 12,870 during last year's budget, and hence there's no reason for some school heads to hike fees.
I wish to reiterate that secondary school fees payable by students should be as per government policy, as stated in the ministerial guidelines and circulars issued to all public schools. The ministry issued a circular to county directors of education and principals of secondary schools in December 2014 last year, stating that schools were not to charge beyond those which were levied in 2013.
The wrangles in Narok have taken another twist after Senator Stephen Ole Ntutu and 4 MPs snubbed a meeting convened by Deputy President William Ruto. The Narok governor turned up for the reconciliation talks only to find that Ole Ntutu and his allies were a no-show. Najma Ismail with the details.
The wrangles that have seen Narok County engulfed in demonstrations that caused 2 deaths and many injuries late last month have stubbornly stayed unresolved. Narok Senator Stephen Ole Ntutu and 4 MPs failed to show up for the reconciliation talks called by Deputy President William Ruto at his current residence.
Hakuna issues, ni mambo ya ukabila.
Ntutu and his allies have insisted the meeting was only called to clear Governor Tunai's name.
Kama walichunguza kitambo, juzi mungekuwa na maandamano. Ama pengine iko maofisi pengine wamekula ile kukunono. Nani najua?
The Ntutu-led factions said that the matter at hand was beyond the deputy president and that it is only President Kenyatta who can resolve the issue if he goes to Narok to talk to the locals. This is the second time that the legislators have failed to come to an amicable solution. Last Saturday, Ruto met the MPs at a city hotel but failed to convince them into reconciliation table with the governor.
And I want to appeal to all the elected leaders of Narok County, starting from the senator to the MPs and to the members of the county assembly, that this county belongs to us.
Whether or not Senator Ntutu and his team will stay in Jubilee remains to be seen, since squad leaders have sent them several proposals, trying to take advantage of the conflict between the senator's side and the governor's faction.
Ukombozi sio? Na sisi ni wakombozi. ingawaje wako pande ile, lakini tuko pamoja na wao.
Najma Ismail, KTN.
Kisumu Central Member of Parliament Ken Obura says he will be tabling a motion to have the National Assembly inquire into the deaths of the late Senators Mutula Kilonzo and Otieno Kajwang, as well as Raila Odinga's son, the late Fidel Odinga. He has already proposed the names of the 14 members of the National Assembly to be part of the team to lead that probe.
Concerned that several national leaders and all prominent personalities, including the late Honorable Senator Mutula Kilonzo, the late Honorable Senator Otieno Kajwang, and the late Fidel Castro Odinga, have lost their lives in unclear circumstances in the last 2 years. Further concerned that the causes of the deaths of these prominent national leaders have been shrouded in mystery, creating unnecessary anxiety among different groups of people. I will be asking the House to establish a select committee to comprehensively investigate and inquire into the causes of deaths of the three personalities, consider and review the related findings on the deaths, and table its report within 90 days to the House.
Let's see how that goes. We'll keep an eye on it for you. The Ministry of Lands, led by Cabinet Secretary Charity Ngelu and the National Land Commission, last evening held talks with leaders from Makueni County over the standard gauge railway. The matter of land compensation took center stage in the 3-hour closed-door meeting.
The construction of the standard gauge railway, which commenced last year, has not gone without challenges. Key among them is the compensation of landowners whose land was obtained by the government through compulsory acquisition. It is an issue that has drawn the attention of the head of state.
Haswa kama kiongozi wa nchi hii, nitaendelea kuomba viongozi wote wawe watu ambao watakuwa na huruma ya watu wale ambao wanaongoza, wawe watu ambao watakuwa wanajua shida ya wale ambao wanaongoza, na tuweze kuweka siasa zetu kando na tuweze kufanyia wananchi wetu kazi.
When President Kenyatta visited Mtitwandei in Makueni County last week to supervise progress on the construction, he spoke about the job opportunities the gauge constructions would bring to the area residents.
Mradi utatuwezesha kama nchi kuweza kuinua uchumi wetu kwa zaidi ya 1.5% minimum.
But it is a directive he gave during that event that has brought a convergence of leaders from Makueni, the National Lands Commission and the Ministry of Lands together to discuss on the compensation method used.
To make them understand how the compensation program was put in place, how people were identified, whether we followed the right procedures to identify and to compensate them.
The leaders also needed to know the entire project which we have done. There were issues about compensation which we have addressed. There were issues about sand harvesting which we have addressed. There are issues of damaged roads which we have addressed.
The local leaders, however, insist that the talks were only a reactive approach to a contentious issue.
You cannot give somebody a block figure and say, I've given you 2 million shillings. And yet that person is saying, my land has got trees, my land has got a house. We have insisted that you give them the detail. Information is power. The people of Makueni are entitled to all the information. Every detail. Let them absorb and let them complain, but give it to them.
The government must really not take advantage of the people of Makueni.
But the Lands Commission insists that the talks went well.
We have agreed on the way forward that next week we shall go to the ground with the leaders and the affected persons.
It remains unclear the terms of the compensation settlement as the matter is still in court, but the ministry says this issue will not affect the construction. The first phase of the construction began in earnest last year, while the second phase, which kicks off this year, will see the rail pass through Kajiado, Makueni and Machakos counties. Timothy Otieno, KTN.
Let's look at politics now. Elijah Memusi Kanchori was today handed the CORD certificate allowing him to vie for the Kajiado Central by-election slated for March 16th. Kanchori, who had ditched TNA after losing out on the Jubilee primaries to Patrick Tutui, will now be the CORD flag bearer in the coming parliamentary election. Memusi is set to receive the official IEBC certificate of nomination, setting the stage for the official campaign period that will begin on February 18th and end on March 14th. The Kajiado Central seat fell vacant after ODM's Joseph Nkaiseri was appointed Interior Cabinet Secretary last year.
Leo tunatangaza ya kwamba vita ya kutetea kiti cha Kajiado Central umeanza leo. Na wale jamaa wajue tunakuja. Tukijane tunakuja. Ana hatuwezi kutishwa. Beba pesa ya treasury yote. Kuna mwaga huko. Haitasaidia nyinyi. Haitasaidia nyinyi. Chukue masilaha yote mweke kule. Haitasaidia nyinyi. Sisi tunakuja na nguvu ya wananchi wa Kenya wote.
Tuna imani ya kwamba uchaguzi huu utakuwa ni ushindi kwetu na nguvu tunayo ni ya kutoka kwa Mwenyezi Mungu.
Many thanks for staying with KTN Prime. It was yet another dark day as the body of another Kenyan was flown into the country from Saudi Arabia in what is suspected to have been murder. The family of 35-year-old Ansila Kenga has refused to buy reports that Ansila committed suicide. KTN's Francis Ontomwa reports from Kilifi.
Emotions were high as finally the body of the late Ansila Charo Kenga touched down at the Moi International Airport, Mombasa. Anger greeted the much-awaited arrival. Reports from the Kenyan consulate in Saudi say the late Ansila, who resided in Jeddah, committed suicide, but the family has flatly refused to buy that.
Sikubaliani kwa sababu kule nasikia kuna ripoti ya daktari kwa consulate ambao alisema kwamba she committed suicide. Sasa ukiangalia ile report, ukisikia report na vile tumeona kwa video, basi inakuwa kitu tofauti.
This is the video that has got many talking and made rounds on social media. The family insists the girl being tortured in the video is Ansila Kenga, though KTN could not independently verify this.
Alikuwa akiita mama, pia kuna wakati mwingine alikuwa akisema nafa, 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 nalaga, nalaga.
The late Ansila left for Saudi Arabia last year to seek greener pastures, but far from it and to a chagrin, things took another course.
Kulingana na clip ambayo tuko nayo, ni msichana anapigwa na hali ambayo sio ya kisawasawa, ni hali ya kinyama, na tunapinga vikali kabisa kitendo kama kile.
The family says they were told Ansila died on December 1st last year, but they only learnt of the death 2 weeks ago in mid-January. She worked as a maid. Even as the family waits for the autopsy reports at Jocham Hospital, Mombasa, the family appears to have resigned to fate. At Haki Kanjuni village in Ganze, a final resting place has already been prepared. The fact that the late Kenga's younger sister is still holed up in Saudi Arabia is another reason why this family is still having sleepless nights.
Watu hawa ambao kwamba mamefanya huyu mtoto wangu maovu hii. Sina nguvu, lakini kama na nguvu mimi ningewaua. Kwa vile hasira naosikia.
A problem bedeviling many homes. At another homestead in Kilifi, Kabibi Goho and Esther Dama are counting their blessings for making a lucky escape from the jaws of death in Saudi a few weeks ago.
Tunafanya kazi pale ndani, watoto wanakuambia ili amekutuma kitu umechoka, unamwambia, anakuambia umetoka Kenya, umenunuliwa, wewe ni mtumwa kwetu. Watoto sasa.
This is not the first time events of this kind are being reported from Saudi Arabia. Last year, the government moved to ban over 900 recruitment agencies for Gulf countries. But from the look of things, the nuts are still glaringly loose. But back here at Kilifi home, the family is still reeling from the harsh experience. Now, this continues to depict the kind of silent suffering that many Kenyans who are working in the countries of Middle East continue to undergo. Now, as it appears, the old story of milk and honey overseas appears to have just remained tales. Francis Ontomwa, KTN, Kilifi.
As Ontomo there says, KTN cannot verify the authenticity of the video used in that particular story. Let's take you to Western Kenya now. 2 construction workers died, 4 were badly hurt, and 18 others narrowly escaped death in Milimani Estate, Kakamega. The workers were digging a foundation for a new building when the adjacent unsecured soil walls caved in on them. According to the construction workers, part of the house on site was demolished to offset the construction of a new storied hotel. NEM officials said the soil could not sustain the construction. The owner of the building wasn't on site when the tragedy occurred. The foreman and contractor could not be reached for comment.
Neka blinding hivi. Sasa wakati wengine tunakuja kubeba ndoo hivi, wengine bado wako hapa hivyo, fundi wanagonga hizo mbao hizo za ndani hizo. Sasa hiyo udongo ikaanguka hivi.
Tumesema huu mjengo usimamishwe kuanzia sasa, na hawa ambao ni makontrakta watuletee stakabadhi zao tuone kama kweli walipewa stakabadhi za kuanza kazi hapa katika site hii.
Good evening and welcome to KTN Business. My name is Abi Agina. The National Treasury and the Kenya Revenue Authority are set to develop a value-added tax payment framework to facilitate local contractors in the standard gauge railway project. This comes after confusion on its implementation on the threatened to stall the 357 billion shillings project. Philip Keitani has more on that story.
The standard gauge rail project has been somewhat a pet project for the Jubilee government, but ever since its launch in 2013, it has run into numerous hurdles that have threatened to derail the project. Fresh on the list of challenges is local contractors opposed to the value-added tax levied on them to supply products to the project. Under the agreement signed between the government and the China Export-Exim Bank, the main financier of the project, suppliers to the project are exempt from the levy. And now the taxman has come out to clear the air.
KRA has gone out of its way to accommodate SGR demands and is committed to playing its role to facilitate the project's success.
2 weeks ago, over 150 suppliers had raised concern over the 16% levy being charged to them, despite the fact that the main contractors also claim tax refunds. But now the taxman says it has devised a framework together with Treasury that seeks to iron out the issue. KRA has so far pre-qualified 124 contractors, adding that there is need to keep the number low to avoid exploitation of the loopholes. The taxman also promises to conduct continuous audit of the companies, ensuring strict adherence to the working framework.
This arrangement will allow project implementation to proceed smoothly within the existing legal confines, while also removing from SGR suppliers the risk of non-compliance with VAT requirements.
The line, covering 485 kilometers, is estimated to cost 327 billion shillings. Under the deal, Kenya will cover only 10% of this cost that covers the value-added tax on goods for the project, as well as land purchase, where the line is expected to cross. The initial purchase of the project from Mombasa to Nairobi is being built by the China Road and Bridge Corporation and is expected to be ready by early 2017. Construction has been delayed since 2013 due to legal squabbles about tendering, as well as how to compensate for government expropriated land. Philip Keitan, KTN Business.
Well, moving on, Tropical Power Company has unveiled the country's first biogas plant in the country, adding 2.2 megawatts to the national grid. The 500 million shillings plant, located in Naivasha, will use vegetable residue, mainly from baby corn, to produce power. The plant, located on Gorge Farm in the Lake Town, will use 50,000 tons of vegetable residue per year to produce methane gas, which will then be used to run the 2 engines that would produce 2.2 megawatts. The energy park took a year to build, and the power it will put into the national grid will cost 10 US cents per kilowatt hour, compared with 38 US cents per kilowatt hour for diesel generated power. In addition, the plant will also house a 10 megawatt grid connected solar plant Tropical plans to build renewable power assets across Africa, producing more than 130 megawatts by 2018. The company is planning a plant in Ghana, replicating the original model in Kenya near Lake Volta. The power plant is expected to supply up to 10,000 homes with power directly after the power purchase agreement was signed and power lines to the national grid connected. Well, moving on, accountants stand to face a 5 million shillings fine if found to have engaged in any financial impropriety for personal or corporate gain. Proposals to the Accountants Amendment Bill go ahead to set stiffer penalties, which further propose that any accountant found culpable risks having their practicing license revoked for 10 years. The push to have punitive penalties comes on the back of rising cases of fraud in companies, according to the Institute of Certified Public Accountants, ISPAC. Growing cases of accountants working in cahoots with top managers to defraud companies of their hard-earned profits is now getting out of hand. It has now caught the attention of the highest organ representing accountants in the country.
Currently, we have 6 active cases going on, which are being dealt with.
According to ISPAC, they have since investigated over 20 cases in connection with accountants engaging in falsification of financial records to embezzle company funds.
If you are found to have breached a professional code of conduct, there is a penalty that is being proposed for 5 million, that you will be fined for 5 million, and there's a possibility of actually your membership being revoked for a maximum period of 10 years, your membership or your practicing certificate, so that you actually don't practice. In other words, you run out of business.
The changing tide and hard economic times have been cited among the reasons as to why accountants are increasingly becoming vulnerable to financial impropriety.
The pressure coming from the chain of the top management and even the directors may actually at times put pressure on the accountant to be able to play the role of falsification of numbers, so to speak.
As per the proposed Accountants Amendment Bill, audit companies that are implicated in having falsified books of accounts stand to lose 5% of the revenue as part of the measures being mooted to stem the financial misconduct among accountants. The current law in force, the Accountants Act, has been deemed to be weak by observers who have welcomed the proposed bill, which is yet to be tabled and debated in Parliament. Well, interesting development there. Parastatals and private sectors are lagging behind in integrating women onto their boards of directors and company management. This is in spite of the government paving the way for inclusion of women in leadership in a new wave that seeks gender parity in leadership and business. Kenya's cabinet has 33% women representative, while members of parliament form 25% of the National Assembly. Parastatals and private sector figures are estimated to be lower, and stakeholders are now calling for appointment of more women into business leadership. This comes even as the Global Membership Organization and Community of Women Corporate Directors, WCD, launched its offices in the country in a move expected to change the business and leadership landscape in the country.
The situation is not as impressive when we look at parastatals and state-owned enterprises, as well as the private sector corporations. Women are not making it in sufficient numbers, and the question remains, what are the constraints and how can we change the tide?
Companies across all sectors with the most women on their boards of directors significantly and consistently outperform those with no female representation by 41% in terms of return on equity and by 56% in terms of operating results.
Meeting women only in chamas isn't it. We can change things. We want to see this room full. We want to see more people sitting in these board meetings. We want to engage more and make that difference that is being said.
Well, let's now take a look at our financial report.
Well, it's time for the day's sports. I'm Lynn Washira. Former Gor Mahia forward Kevin Omondi avenged for his former employer's loss to visiting Dynamos as he helped his new team to a 1-0 win over the Zambian Giants at the Nyayo National Stadium. It was Dynamos' second friendly match in the country after Sunday's 3-0 win over Gor Mahia. Some Timbers charges had to wait until the 41st minute before Mondi caught the Dynamo defense flat-footed. Enoch Agwanda could have easily stretched Batoto Bamungu's lead, but he fluffed his opportunity. The visitors, who beat Gor Mahia 3-0 over the weekend, got an opportunity to restore parity when Felix Sunzu was brought down by Willis Ouma, but Julius Situmbeko's spot was parried away by the ever-busy David Okello.
But wako sawa cause communication ni muhimu, tunaelewana, but next game tutaungana vizuri cause hatujangeana sana.
They are very clever, they use the spaces, they are very fast, and when you contain them, I think the credit goes to Sofapaka players. They could have had some chances of scoring. Matches we also had, and which bounced off the crossbar and so forth. It's a good team powder enough.
And Kenya's Sheila Kotecha qualified for the quarterfinals of the Nairobi International Junior Tennis Championships. Sheila overpowered Janej Zaptonik from Slovakia by 2-1 at the Nairobi club on the third day of the tournament.
After a majority of the Kenyan players were eliminated from the competition on day 2, the hopes of having local players in the next round rested on Sheila Kotecha, who faced Janej Zaptonik from Slovakia. The youngster was quick off the serves as he claimed the first set 6-2. He however lost concentration in the second to lose to Janej, but later picked himself in the third to take the honours. The youngster now has his sights set on improving his ITF rankings as he features in more competitions.
I hope to get in the top 50 of ITF by maybe 16 or 15 so I can start playing the majors, and I'm a small age so I can have a bigger chance.
Despite a majority of Kenyan players missing out in the remaining rounds of the competition, Kenyan coaches are upbeat the sport is heading in the right direction in the country.
We can try to host many tournaments, and sending our players outside the country, we can really achieve our goals. It's not too late.
In other matches, Said Nkurunziza beat Karim Abdirraif 6-3, 6-3, while in the girls singles, Valde Shudrai beat Vicky Gering 6-3, 2-6 and 6-3. Robinson Okenye, KTN Sports.
And moving on, the return of 3 experienced Kenya Rugby Sevens players to the national team could be the turning point to a team that is at a risk of losing its core status. The 4th stop of the World Rugby Sevens series in Wellington this weekend will provide an opportunity for the boys to redeem themselves. Kenya is in Group D together with Argentina, Samoa and Scotland. The burden is squarely on newly appointed head coach Felix Ochieng to prove a point.
With Felix Ochieng at the helm of the National Rugby Sevens team and the return of experienced crop of players led by that all-time highest IRB World Series try scorer Colin Sinjera, Kenya hopes to put behind the below-par performance registered in the opening 3 legs in Gold Coast, Dubai and South Africa. Lavin Osego, Tony Ward, Felix Ayange, Michael Wanjala and Billy Odhiambo are expected to add class and pace to the team that now lies 14th with 11 points. Kenya is 1 place better than Japan, the other core team fighting to remain afloat. In the lower half above Kenya are Portugal with 13 points, Canada with 14, France 19 and Wales 25. A lot of Kenya rugby lovers expect coach Felix Ochieng to lead his charges to the semi-finals in Wellington, but that depends on how his team navigates through the Group D, which has Argentina, Scotland and Samoa. Kenya will get a Wellington Sevens campaign underway against Argentina at 3:24 Friday morning. Then Scotland at 6:24 a.m. before winding up their group encounter against Samoa at 9:45 a.m. Rugby pundits in the country argue that excitement is beginning to build and there could be a change in fortunes for Team Kenya, and with the next leg at hand, Felix Ochieng will surely want to start his reign on a winning gear. Moses Wahesi, KTN Sports.
Should teachers heed the president's advice and shelve the demand for a pay hike? That was our big question tonight on KTN Prime. We'll be taking a look at the screens for just how you have polled. But let me see if I can sample some of your tweets that we have been getting here. Right there on your screen there. 31% yes, 69% of you say no. At Bernard Abuga says yes, teachers have demanded too much so far. They should sign performance contracts first before any pay hike. At J. Koech says no, the advice is not new. Court is still the best option. But again, the pay should be commensurate to results. At Marie says no, they should first settle the teachers once and for all because we are tired of all these strikes. Edwin Moshere says teachers should know that the taxpayer cannot afford to pay what they're demanding for with current economic state. Ronnie Raphael says, so when it's teachers' turn, Rome was not built in a day. What of senior civil servants, mortgages and car grants? Let me see if I can see more. Omweri _Robin says the president should know that teachers have families. With all that fees, should their kids remain at home? Sammy Chefs finally says no, we are what we are today because of a teacher somewhere. Pay them and pay them well. Those are your thoughts on our big question tonight on whether or not teachers should listen to the president. We thank you for watching KTN Prime. I'm Lindo. Good to have a good night. Remember, Jeff Koinange Live begins in just a few minutes tonight. He is hosting investigative journalist Mohammed Ali. Stay with KTN.